Hi, everyone. Welcome to the supplemental meeting in September. It's September 16th of the Finance and Revenue Committee. I'm calling this committee meeting to order, and we'll start with roll call. I'll hand that over to Isabel.
Thank you. Cheryl Ramirez.
Here.
Thank you. Chen Wei Chi, I did not see him. Mary Lou Heinrich.
Here.
Thank you. Richard Gibson.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Goodman.
Yes, here.
Thank you. John Santa.
Here.
Thank you. Bethany Stairs.
Here.
Thank you. Charlie Swanson.
Here.
Thank you. That's everyone.
Thank you, Isabel. We'll review the agenda next. And I just wanted to say my connection is a little unstable, so at times I may need to turn my camera off if I'm getting that message on my screen, so I apologize for that. Okay, so we're going to go through today's agenda. As requested, we've invited Board Chair Helen Belanca to clarify a couple of the discussions we had at the last board meeting last month. And she'll be here. I don't know if she's here yet, Mimi, but or Isabel, I don't know. So anyway,
Seeing her yet.
Whenever she comes on, we'll invite her to clarify a couple of things. We'll work on the financial target, the core revenue discussion, and then we'll go through the draft straw proposal in more detail. We're not voting on the straw proposal today. There's still more where we'll work on wrapping that proposal up, which will be in 2 weeks. We do have 2 people signed up for public comment today, and potentially one other one. And then we'll once we get done with the proposal review, we'll also think about next meeting topics and plan ahead, and I'll rely on Echo Northwest to help us with that. With that, I think I'm turning it over to Mimi to explain something.
Yeah. All right. You can go on to the next slide, Isabel. Thank you. So one of the things that I wanted to mention, and we'll go into more detail when we talk about the previous meeting follow-up, is that all of the committees have meeting summaries, and all of the, which has been happening since before our time, and all of those summaries can be found online, just connected with the other meeting materials, usually a couple days after the meeting has been completed, so people can always go back and check. We will be, just to make it a little bit easier for committee members, Isabel will be going forward, emailing those out when you get the agenda for the next meeting so people can review them. But what we propose to do is then in the beginning of each meeting, when the chair does welcome remarks and roll call, to give people the opportunity, if there's any comments that they want to make, or have questions, or feel that something needs to be clarified, we'll have the opportunity at the top of the meeting. So okay. Yeah, and if we go on to the next slide. Still trying to see, and apologize for the tiny font. So we're still waiting for Chair Belanca, but this is particularly about at the Finance and Revenue Committee meeting, there was a discussion about the minutes and the presentation that occurred at the Universal Health Plan Governance Board meeting that occurred on August 21st. And there was a request from this committee to ensure that there was clarity around something that had been a question to the board. So I just, what happened was in the meeting minutes from that August 21st meeting, the following statement was put in the minutes at the timestamp, or at the time of that, when those slides kind of came up. And it said, so what it says is, per the Finance and Revenue Committee meeting on September 2nd, please note that the following questions posed to the board were from an individual Finance and Revenue Committee member, not from the committee as a whole. So I just wanted to pause here for a second and make sure that that was sufficient and that people feel comfortable with that, that works for them.
Okay with me.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Next, again, also this is from that meeting, the committee meeting on September 2nd. There was a discussion about having a finance and revenue committee plus plan design, a sort of a double meeting with both committees together. And the committee chairs spoke about this, and the decision was because all of the timelines and work plans are a little bit delayed just because of onboarding our consultant groups, that it would be too cumbersome to have something with an additional meeting with everyone together. So the what was posed was that questions will be solicited from each of the committees, and there, if possible, if people are willing to do it, have a representative from each committee to attend the alternate sets of committee meetings. Also during the board meetings, really taking the time to make sure that as the board, as the committee chairs are giving their updates, that all of that sort of cross communication is addressed. So I will also, and Cheryl, if you wanted to add anything to that.
I don't think so. I do see Chair Belanca in the waiting room too, so just wanted to tell you that.
Oh, excellent. That's great. I'll just get through the end of this and then turn it over to Chair Belanca. Just a couple of other follow-ups. There was a discussion, and this has been brought forth at other times during the committee meetings about additional evaluation of Medicare population. And I just wanted to ensure these committee members and the people listening that that is going on. That particular topic is not going to be specifically addressed at this meeting, but that it is, that is definitely being taken in consideration and work is happening on that. Next, I wanted to bring up the topic of having adding an additional Finance and Revenue Committee member. And I'll just set the stage a little bit. Back at the July committee meeting, it was one of the committee members had resigned from the committee. There previously had been another member who had resigned too. And it was brought up from the committee that they would, that they thought it would be a good idea to have one additional committee member, because currently there are 8 committee members. It would be nice to have 9. It's easier if there's an odd number. I don't know if you remember, but we presented a policy or a procedure rather about how new committee members can be brought on board. What was brought up to me was that there was a question about if the members of this committee had any direction or advice about the attributes or characteristics or strengths of a new committee member that they thought would be important to add. So sorry, that was just so much talking, but really this is just an opportunity for someone to say, yes, I think, continue to think it's important that we have one more committee member, and I think these attributes would be important. So I'll pause for right now. And if anyone else wants to add into that, that would be great. Excellent. I'll let, I saw Cheryl's first and then John Santa.
Oh, me first? Just
Yep.
wanted to check. Okay. So you may, well, some of you haven't been with the committee the whole time, but we've had 3 people step down from our committee so far, the original chair and then 2 other committee members. At the time that people applied, there weren't as many applicants for this committee as some of the other ones. I know one question was, why is this committee smaller? And there just weren't that, there weren't as many applicants. So we chose to make the committee geographically representative and people with different backgrounds. So we can choose from the pool that we originally had, and we need to probably have a meeting of the board members to put together, maybe a set of recommendations for the rest of the committee that we can share with you. So that might be a kind of a side meeting to prepare for the next committee meeting is how I'm seeing the process. And just to be clear, to get to 9, we only need to add one more committee member. So that's what we're looking at right now.
All right, and John, Santa. You're on mute right now, John.
Thanks for bringing this up. First, kind of an awkward issue. I mean, we have 8 committee members, but we have a member or two who still is struggling to make meetings. And I think if you look back at the record, you know, I think it would be great to have 8 or 9 members who were able, from a scheduling point of view, to attend consistently, and I'd ask that you all give that some thought. For myself, I think it would be terrific to add a member or more than one member who had expertise around the economics and issues and administrative issues of clinician groups. You know, group either clinicians who were medical directors of such groups or administrators who were the administrators of those groups. I think a person or persons like that could really be of benefit. I'd even go so far as to wonder if we could ask that a subcommittee of this group, or a subcommittee populated of people like that, could be formed to advise us on you know, the key questions around. I mean, those groups are going to need to support this. If we don't have the support of those groups, you know, we'll have a lot of work to do to catch up. So those are just my suggestions.
Thanks, John. Those are good suggestions. Mary Lou?
Well,
Oh, do you have anything, Mimi, that you wanted to say?
No,
Or-
thank you.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Okay,
Okay.
Mary Lou.
Mary Lou here. I was so intent listening to John, I kind of lost my train here. Let me quickly think. I think what I was trying to say, and I had a discussion a bit with Mimi the other day about this, that since I wasn't here at the beginning when we really talked about forming these committees, and just kind of came on, as I say, in the middle of the movie, done my best to kind of catch up and be a participating member. But so I don't know whether there was ever anything really written or discussed about. I mean, John's, I agree with him that it would be good to have somebody with the type background, and there seemed like on the list of people for potentials that there might be 1 or 2 of those kinds. But kind of like, was there real discussion on what expertise and who it is, you know, that kind of initially formed this committee? That was, you know, were there criteria put forward? Or and I just came on because as a new board member, Helen asked me, you know, which committee would I like to be on, because there already were board members on the various committees. And so for better or worse, I said, well, I guess it looked smaller and I'd take the finance and revenue one. But yeah, this just the whole thing, but the train has moved down the track. I think it has moved really well. I'm looking forward to discussion today. I've read all the materials and been part of the discussions and tried to bring, you know, the kind of limited expertise that I have in this to the discussions. But first of all, there's people like the list that we get, or got the spreadsheet of potential members. First of all, are those, I guess, a question, you know, people who applied back 1.5 years ago? And if so, do we have any idea whether they even live in Oregon anymore, or they are interested anymore, or whatever? Or is it just kind of an old list that we're looking at? And I know I was a little overwhelmed with the request to kind of look at this list
Mary
and
Lou,
come up with names and make a recommendation without, I just didn't understand how the committee had really, either yes or no, had really worked on, these are the kinds of people we need on this committee. And this is who we've got now. And this is what we're lacking. So I just felt I couldn't really respond.
Mary Lou, I can respond in part. It might not be exactly the answer that you're looking for, but at the time that we recruited committee members, we received a list of those people who had applied and were interested in this particular committee. And the former chair and I reviewed the list and we looked for various backgrounds, areas of expertise that we've been talking about. And in fact, I bet Bethany's going to chime in that she is one such expert. I'll let her talk for herself. And so we would just have to take a look at the original list and, literally ask if they're still interested and still live in. We don't know the answer to that question, but we will have to go through that list first. And then if we can't find another committee member, or maybe 2 or 3, depending on what we all decide to do, we will have to probably put together a new application process, is what I would guess. So with that, I want to hand it over to Bethany.
Thank you. Good morning. I just wanted to chime in because I am the current medical director at a community clinic in East Multnomah County. So I've been in this position for quite a while and haven't been as vocal in our meetings because I haven't had anything different to say. But I definitely am here to represent that piece.
Thank you so much, Bethany. Charlie.
At this point, I probably don't have much to add. I was going to say I agree with John, and I'm glad that we have Bethany on here. And I would say that besides physician groups, maybe this is included in physician groups, I'm not sure, but health system financial officer or something like that would also be a useful sort of person, but that might be included in what John was saying. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Charlie. I'll hand it back over to you, Mimi, or do we want to hand it over to Chair Belanca first?
Yeah, I will just say committee meeting summaries. I already kind of touched on that topic. So I will hand it over to Chair Belanca right now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all your great work to date. Before I start, I'll comment on the discussion that was just happening. When the board decided to open up our work to the public, to invite members of the public to join the committee, we did have a really robust process of recruiting folks. We just sent invitation far and wide on multiple listservs and email groups and everywhere we could think of. And we had hundreds and hundreds of people apply to our committees. We chose 47 out of the couple hundred that applied. And when people applied, we asked them to choose the committee they felt they could best offer their services to. And then once we had the initial candidates, we sorted through them, the chairs of the committees, and did a little bit of horse trading in the sense of, wow, this person seems like they'd be a really great fit on your committee, and we could really use someone with that expertise on our committee. And so we did a little bit of that. But the main way that people join the committees, and if there are folks that you want to join this committee, I think the most effective way to get the folks you want on your committee is to personally recruit them. I think some of you know that, like if someone directly asks you, hey, we really need you, come on board, can you join this committee? So if any of you know people that you want to join, that is a really effective way. I believe that I was asked to come to this meeting because there was a question about a phrase that I used in regards to the deliverable of your work, that I used the phrase politically feasible in terms of the revenue structure that we're asking this committee to come up with, and that people had questions about that. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay. So I will admit that I use that term fairly loosely. I understand that some people interpret that to mean feasible in terms of will it gather support in our state legislature. And I didn't mean specific to legislative support when I use the term politically feasible. I use that term more in terms of like, will all of the interested parties, in terms of the business community, the healthcare community, includes the legislative body, will people think that this is something that's feasible? Will this sell? Will this be something that people will really consider? So we need to come up with a plan, of course, that takes into consideration all kinds of factors, where we are financially as a state, where we are in our healthcare system, where our business community is, and come up with something that people, I think there's a tendency with this type of work for people to look at it and say, that'll never work. We're not even going to consider it, right? And so the plan, the revenue structure that we're asking this committee to come up with needs to hold water. It needs to be something that is workable given the constraints that currently exist in our state. That's what I meant by politically feasible. It of course includes, you know, some legislators have to buy in, but that's not specifically what it meant. Does that help?
Yes, to me it does. Thanks for the clarification, Helen. Does anyone have questions for Chair Belenka? Jeff?
Good morning. Thank you, Helen, for joining us today. I know how busy your schedule is, just not only for this entire process, but just for your life in general. So thank you. Just a follow-on question for clarification. Just to confirm, our charge is a single-payer universal health care plan? Is that accurate? Is that, if I say that, is that accurate?
Well, that's the board's charge. Yes.
So that's our charge also.
To come up with the revenue structure that would support
Yes.
that plan. Yes. Yes. Specifically the revenue.
Single payer universal health care.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. I thought so, but I appreciate the clarification.
Any other questions or comments? Mary Lou?
I understand, Helen, the difficulty in terms of phraseology sometimes when we're trying to explain something. What I have tried to tell people is that I really see the task of the board is to really come up with the very best plan. And of course, it has to have feasibility in it. It's got to have, you know, looking at all these factors, but to really take the expertise of all the people on these various committees, their energy, their input, the people on the board, then ultimately, when it gets handed all the various pieces of the puzzle, we have got to kind of make sure that it all kind of fits together and makes sense, and that we as board members can say, at this moment in time, with the information we have, this is the best plan that we can come up with, and then hand it over to the legislators, to wherever, you know, they decide to do with it, however, and not so much, because I do hear people saying, well, how are you going to sell this thing? Or how are you going to, and I'm going, I really don't think that's the board's job. I really think the board's job is to do our very best at creating the plan. And then, you know, it'll be handed to others who will try to make sure that it goes where it needs to go. And
Yeah.
ultimately, you know, my passion is I want this to become the reality of the land. Whether it will in my lifetime or not, I'm not sure. But, you know, I just feel that's what we're all doing, the committee members, and then ultimately the board, putting together just the very best plan. And it won't be perfect because we're not perfect and the systems that we're dealing with aren't. So that's just kind of my own.
Yeah. I 100% agree, Mary Lou. I think that's absolutely right. That's
Okay.
absolutely right. We want you to just come up with the best plan that you can. And, you know, I know Morgan has already explored some of this with you, but inherent in that, yes, we want you to present us with the best plan you can come up with. And inherent in that, I think we're going to be looking at, well, what were the alternatives that you considered?
Yeah.
That you thought, you know, this was better than that. So, you know, if you say, you know, this is kind of how we think it'll work best, we consider doing this other type of tax,
Yeah.
but, you know, we think that's less feasible. We think it's less reliable, whatever it is. But looking at a couple of options, I think the board would really appreciate from this committee seeing, here's our best work, here's like 2 or 3 other things that we considered that are sort of, you know, second, third, fourth place maybe, but that we really think that this one is the best one. So we really want to know more about your thinking too, and what else you've considered. So not just the one single plan, but having a few options in there.
Thank you for those recommendations, Helen. Appreciate that. John?
Yeah, I would just like to second Mary Lou's comments. I think we're on track for something that is feasible. It is unique, and there are some pieces in it that you know, haven't been tried or tested. But I think it's feasible. And then the sellability part is, of course, much more difficult, because it's, well, who are you selling it to? You know, because in our country, obviously, it has to be sellable to a portion of the voters and a portion of the public. And yeah, I think that's just beyond our charge, and I'm happy to hear that that's not something that we should be figuring out. From what I hear, I think we're headed in the right direction, and I think we have considered a number of other options and decided to put some of them behind us. And so I think we're doing what you've asked us to do in that regard. But the history of all of those will be there, and I think there'll be more of those to come, as some of the things that we've talked about will be discarded for one reason or another. So that's where I'm at. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks, John. Charlie?
I'm going to push back just a little bit, because in my view, one of the ways that you have political feasibility and you bring enough of the public on board is to help them have a say in developing it early on, just at least to some extent. And I think we sort of are doing that, but we need to do that a lot more. And to me, the hardest part that's to sell to the public is going to be the taxes, the tax structure. And so that's the part that we really need to be thinking about. Well, how are we going to solicit sufficient public input on this, on proposal to say, yeah, it's gone out to the public and they would consider this close enough to fair to be supportable. And so I think that's going to be a really important question along the way. And I don't quite know how we do that, but I think it's going to be critical if we're going to get there. And I actually do see that as part of what the governance board should do, rather than having it done after the fact. But you know, maybe I could be convinced otherwise. Maybe it's up to the legislators to choose that. But I don't think so. I think it's got to be part of what we do to the extent we can.
I would say that work is very important, and it is not the work of this committee. There was extensive community engagement by the task force from 2019 to 2022. They did lots and lots of listening sessions with the public to get input on the process and what they thought was important. And they made recommendations to our board based on that input. And then the board will take whatever you come up with, and we will work with our communications committee and a transition committee, which has yet to be formed, to develop a plan to try and sell it to the public. So it's not that isn't important, but part of it has already been done, and the rest of it is beyond the work of this committee. So I'll have you leave that to the future work and really just focus on the task at hand, which is the revenue structure.
I would add to that, yeah, that is the work of the communications committee, and they've just been waiting for us to have something concrete that they can have focus groups on, with what we were calling citizen juries. Maybe we're calling them something different now, to get the public's opinion and from various sectors. So with that, Charlie, do you still have your hand up? Did you want to respond to what Helen said?
Yeah, I do. So I understand that it's not the work of this committee. I did say it's the work of the governance board. But after that feedback comes in, this committee has to be part of the response. I mean, because it cannot be not part of the response, I don't think, because this is the committee that has the expertise to say, well, how can the tax structure work? So I actually think that, yeah, it's not our job as on this committee to do that, but we have to be part of the response to the feedback that does come back.
Yeah,
So
we will tackle that when that comes up. But yes, as Cheryl said, right now, like, we're all just on hold, and the communications committee is waiting to go out and sell some ideas to the interested parties, including the general public, but it's going to be difficult to do that unless we have something for them to react to. So I would say focusing on the task at hand is the key, and then we'll circle back to that when the time comes.
Jeff?
Yes, thank you. As a follow-on to Charlie's comments about the tax being able to present that, the other key element to make this all work is the waiver from the federal government on Medicare and Medicaid to be
Yep.
able to have those dollars go into the pool.
Absolutely.
So I think those are the two elements: the taxes on the revenue side, the taxes, the
Yep.
waiver, and then the offsets that occurred from the new system.
Yes, and the operations committee is responsible for handling the waiver process. So, and our consultants are working on that, or have been working on that as well. So, yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. John?
Yeah, just a comment or two. First of all, I agree with Helen's comments about what the task force did. And that was very significant and an investment in terms of what the public wanted. But what we struggled with was getting engagement with key stakeholders, which in Oregon, if you don't have the support of at least some of the key stakeholders, you have some hard work to do. And I think particularly when it comes to our work, it will be key to be able to weigh the response of key stakeholders. And by the way, these are stakeholders that have more than sufficient resources to counter whatever we would communicate to the public. It's that process of sitting down with the key stakeholders and in engaging them so that when this gets to the stage of political feasibility, we have a sense of where they're at. And so
Yep. We have a detailed list of, we call them interested parties instead of stakeholders, but it's the same idea. We have a very detailed list of those, as well as a plan to reach out to all of them. And again, that is the work of the communications committee. It's community engagement and communications. That's their role, their task. They will be engaged and involved. They're waiting for this committee to give them a revenue structure that they can react to. They want to know what the details of the plan are. In theory, it all seems like a good idea, but let's break it down and see, like, what would the taxes be? What would the benefits be? And we need that information from this committee. But I think that committee has that part of engaging interested parties well in hand. And they have a consultant working with them who's an expert in that. And so we can leave that to them.
Thanks, Helen. We're getting really behind on the work of this committee. So I'm going to have Mary Lou's comment be the last one on this topic. And I really appreciate all the extra time you spent with us, Helen, today. Go ahead, Mary Lou.
I was going to say similar to Helen, but a little different twist. Yes, if you look at what it said in the law, who needs to be consulted and talked to, and they are, it's not the broad community at large. It's these various, as Helen said, interest groups or stakeholders. One of my concerns, though, is, and maybe when we get the whole revenue plan out in kind of Cliff Notes version, because we've got the longer thing we're going to talk about today, I'm just a little nervous about when those groups are approached, that I'm not sure that the expertise from the committee. Now, maybe from Diana, I don't know, but I think there's going to be just a lot of scrutiny, my feeling is, from the various groups on this particular piece, on how we're going to pay for it. And I just hope that we have at those sessions, somebody or somebody's from this committee who can help explain it, or the consultants or something. So anyway, that I'm just a little vague on how that's all going to go, but I'm sure you're thinking about it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us, Helen. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. I might
Take
lurk
care.
and listen in for just a
Yeah,
little bit.
sure, of course. Go
A
ahead.
lurker, okay.
So let's move on, and I believe we're ready to hand the agenda over to Echo Northwest for the financial target revision. So is that Morgan? Is he here?
I think it is.
Oh,
Yes,
you
I'm
are.
here.
Okay.
Sorry. Gotta find these buttons. Um, Great. Well, I think we will take these pieces one at a time, and I will just want to preface the role here is I'm trying to do more facilitation. We've been trying to help organize and be kind of a focal point just to kind of help move things along. But I think as we get closer and closer to a proposal for the straw proposal, right, that this is the committee's work. And I want to thank big thanks to both Charlie for obviously all the work that he's done even previous to when we joined and organized all this information. And I can't imagine the countless hours that he has dedicated to this, and as well as sort of Richard, particularly over the last 2 weeks since we last met. We've been going back and forth on trying to get to clarity. As we've done that, it's raised some very interesting questions. And the product of that, we'll call this a kind of work in progress because it continues to be a live document, but is, I would say, the representation of the committee's philosophy, some of the key issues and design of the proposal for a straw proposal that we would like to continue working forward. And so with that, that document, I would say, is not a sort of final piece. And I think I just want to make sure that's clarified. We would ultimately like to sort of finalize it, and you see is a lot of the great thinking in there. So with that, I'm going to kind of just try to walk us through a few things here and get us to sort of oriented around these pieces. So with that, I'm going to also lean heavily both on Charlie and Richard to help sort of articulate some of the sort of key sort of philosophy and principles behind a lot of this. So let me go ahead and share a deck. And I'll just say FYI, I've got about a half an hour here, but I have Andrew here as well to be able to sort of pick up. I have a pre-existing overlapping meeting here that I have to attend to. So let me go ahead and share here. Okay. Right. You see the right version. Great. So, so with that, I think the key pieces we wanted to talk about here are, before we even get to some of the sort of administrative pieces, is talk a little about sort of what I think economists call sort of Pareto optimality, which is really to say sort of what extent can or should we say there are sort of more winners than losers, right? And I think the idea of the philosophy of the plan is to really try to create a system that is better tomorrow in a universal health plan as opposed to the system that we have today. And so key pieces of that is that private employer contributions in aggregate remain kind of virtually sort of unchanged. So we transition away from the private premiums to a payroll tax with incremental changes to the corporate income tax and corporate activity tax. That individuals contribute similar amounts in aggregate, so on average, but under the current system, but their contributions are restructured through a sort of more equitable income-based and tax premium model. And then most state and federal government employees see sort of some little sort of change, so not really a true revenue result. But overall, right, the results in a system that has sort of net savings right now, based on the math that we are working off, roughly $600 million, while I think the key piece here is sort of reallocating that responsibility in a more progressive and more transparent way. So hopefully that all came through pretty clearly in the plan. So one thing I do want to sort of note here, and I think as Cheryl's articulated in this piece of the agenda, one of the key features that we've sort of moved on here, and this Charlie brought this up during the last meeting and then subsequent in our work here, is that our cost target that we were working off of for sort of fiscal year 2022, roughly 18.4 million, had an assumed administrative savings rate about 4%. And I would say this number is likely to change as we get more information from Milliman. But in terms of sort of squaring the revenue proposal, what we're trying to do is say, well, let's assume a slightly more optimistic, and based on some of the work that we've seen earlier, that's a potential huge opportunity, and it's unclear exactly what that is. But for the work of this piece here, we're moving that to sort of 8%. So our target here will be slightly less than that 18.4 million, because we're saying in a universal health plan, we're really trying to provide a more efficient system through efficiencies on the administrative side. So I don't know, just pause there and just take sort of any questions, and Charlie, maybe if you want to say anything else on that. But I think that is, call that a sort of a placeholder for sort of future information that we're going to get from plan design.
Yeah, I really have nothing to add other than the comment that I made earlier, that, and I'm not quite sure if you incorporated that into changes already, that it is not based upon 4% of 8% of total healthcare expenditures, but actually 8% of what goes to provider offices. So
Yeah,
our best estimate of that. So yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. Mary Lou, and then Richard, then Cheryl. Oh, Mary Lou, you're on mute.
Thank you. I think this is great. As I read, through several times the proposal and kind of went, my gosh, I've been involved in all of these, listening in and part of this whole thing. And I'm going, oh my goodness, this is really dense. And so I kind of underlined pieces. And so I know this isn't, of course, we're going to need kind of a Cliff Notes version of this, but having this backup, and I think it's really excellent work. And I'm but really stressing again, the thing that kind of keeps jumping out and that I've heard on this committee since I've joined it, about the progressive nature of the way this is, and the equitable, so kind of putting those words that are kind of really clearly as the basis on why we've come up with what we've come up with. So anyway, I think it's very good. And I find it, in the document, but we will need a Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Lou. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I wanted to remind the committee that the tax calculator that we have, that Charlie has built, is an aggregate tax calculator, where we say that overall, the system will be no more expensive than the current employer-sponsored private health insurance system. But ultimately, and then the Pareto principle, can you optimize it for someone without hurting somebody else? We've only partly accomplished that. Down the road, we plan to build calculators for each persona. And by persona, I mean that someone who has a single income working for an employer, supporting a family, or maybe a self-employed person, or maybe two people on Medicare, that sort of thing. And that will build those persona, and we'll say, here is your situation before and after. So that when we go to the public, and also when we test to see how many people are improved, how many people pay a little more, that we'll have it not just on terms of the aggregate, but in terms of individual life situations. And then, of course, as I've mentioned before, we'll have to double each of those personas for a year which you did pretty well, and a year that you got sick or injured, because your financial results, depending on your kind of insurance, are very, very different. So our plan is to do that. It'll be hard, but I also think that'll help for people in the public looking and say, hey, I'm in this group G. Here's what it looks like before and after. Thank you.
Go, Cheryl.
Yes, I agree. That would be super helpful. And similar to Mary Lou, I think we not only need, I don't know, Cliff Notes or executive summary, but we may even need a glossary or something to define some of these things. When I was reading the proposal, I didn't even know what Pareto optimality was, or principle or improvement. And I was wondering if it was someone's name, but I didn't know what that was. And the way that you very quickly defined it, Richard, that would be helpful, to put in a note, either a footnote or because a lot of us don't know these terms, and so that would be helpful to make the case. The other thing that I asked for when I was reading through it this weekend was a side-by-side cost, so we can see exactly how, you know, the current compared to what we're proposing on pager. That would be super helpful to make the case. Yeah, and I think that was all I had. So thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. John?
Cheryl, I'm like you. I looked it up, and my understanding is Pareto was an Italian economist for what that's worth. But I was totally confused by that term, and this immediately clears it up. And this one slide, I think, really makes me feel good that we're headed in terms of a synthesis that we can understand. And the one line that I would just express some concern about and need to understand more, and you don't need to comment on that now, Morgan, is the state, local, and federal government line and that parenthesis. It's just safe to say I'm not sure I understand that. I think they all have an opportunity to save under it, and I don't understand the parenthesis. So just putting that as a point to clarify down the road somewhere.
Thanks, John. Go ahead, Mimi.
Thanks. And I just wanted to clarify that not at this meeting, but at the next meeting, there will be an executive summary, and there will be sort of this kind of the straw proposal format that people are familiar with that is eventually going to be presented to the board. So there will be a standalone Echo Northwest product. There will also then be, as I think Mary Lou was talking about, that sort of those cliff notes, executive summary, some of the history and things like that. So the whole thing together will be presented to the board eventually once it's all been approved. But I just wanted people to know that all of that work is ongoing and will be available for the next meeting.
Charlie, or sorry, Cheryl.
Thanks very much, Mimi. I knew there was something else I was going to mention, and now I remembered. So to Helen's point, I think it's important to review the taxes we considered, but ultimately put to the side. I didn't see that in the proposal. So for example, sales, that's one that I've always been wondering about, and I didn't see it mentioned in the proposal. I do think we should say, well, we thought about sales tax, but because of XYZ, we decided not to include it in our proposal. But this is what it would look like, you know, if we included sales tax or something along those lines, just so the board knows, you know, what we've all considered and decided ultimately not to add to our proposal. I think value added tax is another one of those that we didn't add. So I'd like
Certainly. Go ahead, Charlie.
So related to that, state, local, and federal government save, I do agree. I don't understand the parenthetical comment, but the reason that that statement is there, or the reason it's true, I guess, under our current proposal, is that the fraction of payroll that state, local, and federal governments pay for their employee health care is larger than the fraction that private employers pay in general. And so since we were relying on a payroll tax, we aren't getting as much from those government entities as they're currently contributing. And there's a question of, do we want to try to get some of that? And if so, how? And in general, I would say we probably don't, other than with the federal government, but I don't think we can. I don't know any good way to do that, because I think state and local government savings are a good thing in general, and it will help taxpayers paying taxes to those state and local governments. So I actually think it's a good thing that they're saving. And it's not a huge amount, and I don't see a reasonable way to get it. So somebody might be able to come up with one, but I even if we did, we may not want to do that. So I'll stop there.
Okay, Jeff.
Thank you. Just on the general comment on Pareto, the best way to think about Pareto is just think it's a economic tool for calculating trade-offs. To the point made, I don't recall who, but I think in the final report that we have, in addition to all the detailed report that will be there, is something we approved very early on, is a one-page summary. Here are the revenue sources. Here's the range of dollars from each revenue source. Here are the savings, multiple sources. Here's the range of the savings and the net. That one-page summary is going to be critical as a part of this report that we submit.
Thanks, Jeff. Mary Lou.
Does on that third dot point on state, local, federal, it doesn't clearly say things like, are school districts considered local? Or, I mean, I think of local government as city and county government, but there's also, just a side note quickly, my daughter is a teacher at Portland Public, and she's recently a half-time, and so having to pay half of her premium that Portland Public has paid before, and she's paying $1,200 a month for her half as a single person. So I'm thinking about Portland Public and all of its employees and the amount that they're paying $2,400 a month for a single person in premiums. They must have an astronomical bill for health insurance. And so it seems to me that when you figure out their payroll tax and their whatever, they're going to be saving in a big way, at least in my simple brain. So, and there may be other districts. She worked for Beaverton before and those kind of things. So where are school districts kind of considered in this thing?
I'll chime in. School districts are part of local government by the Bureau of Labor
Definition.
Statistics, the way they keep the
Okay.
statistics. Yes.
Well, I think they're going to save a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
Charlie, did you? Okay, great.
Which is good.
Great. Well, let me move us on here. Richard, do you want to take one of the key pieces? Sorry, I'm going to call on Richard to kind of walk us through, because this was a little bit of his idea here of trying to help explain the EPT and why its function is so critical to the proposal, but also really difficult to explain. So, Richard, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of like with and without the EPT credit and the value to employers versus value to individuals?
Sure.
Yeah.
And when we talk about the personal income tax, I've called it the healthcare personal income tax, just because we're starting a new revenue source, which is the healthcare personal income tax, which has different numbers that it's calculated on. Okay, so the point here is, what is this issue about the credit? Why would we credit the employer payroll tax against the healthcare personal income tax? And so this is a slide that I thought would help explain that. So on the left, you have the current system without employer payroll tax. And on the right hand, I mean, without the credit against the employer payroll tax, and on the right, you have it with the credit of employer payroll tax against healthcare personal income tax. And on the top, you have the cost to the employer, and on the bottom, you have the value to the individual. So starting with the top left here, this is the current system. This is an employer payroll tax without a credit. So the status quo in the left-hand column is, I'm just making it up here just for simplicity. The employer pays the worker $100 in wages, and $20 are paid to the health insurance company, which is corporate tax deductible for the employer. So that the net expense to the company is $100 in wages, $20 in premiums, $120 net expenses. Under the universal health plan proposal, the employer still pays the worker $100 in wages, but now pays $20 as a payroll tax to the state. So the cost to the employer is $120. And they're both paid to the insurance company or paid to the state as a payroll tax. They're both have the same corporate tax application for the company. And so the employer is indifferent. Again, this is idealized, but this is the idea how to conceive of it. The employer is indifferent under the universal health plan. If we look down below to the value to the individual, there is a difference to then if there's not a credit again for the employer payroll tax. On the left, the individual under status quo gets $100 in wages, and yeah, this slide wasn't. This is the first time I've seen this slide, and it's got some errors in it. But under the left, the status quo, the individual gets $100 in wages and gets health care. But under the universal, but has to pay $20 in healthcare personal income tax. And then under the universal health plan, the worker gets $100 in wages. They have to pay $120. They have to pay $20 for the new healthcare personal income tax, and so they're worse off because they get $80. Basically, they're worse off because their net value is $80 plus healthcare, whereas originally they were $100 plus healthcare without the credit. So we need to touch up the slide, but anyway, that's the point we're trying to make there, is that without the credit, the employee essentially is paying twice for it. Let's go to the right-hand side, which goes quicker, then we'll come back and pick up your questions. So with the credit, again, it doesn't really change for the employer because their corporate tax is unchanged, and so they're indifferent to whether we do status quo or the single payer plan. But for the value to the individual, it makes a big difference because under status quo, the person gets $100 in wages and health care, and under the universal health plan proposal with the credit, they get $100 in wages and health care. Whereas without the credit, they get $80 in wages and health care. So they're without the credit, they're $20 worse off. So it's really the question of, instead of, I think the easiest thing is without the credit, the employee would pay twice. Once through the payroll tax, which is essentially conceptually coming from total compensation that would otherwise go to the worker. They're paying once through the employer payroll tax, and again under the personal income tax, healthcare personal income tax, whereas if there's a credit, they only pay once for their healthcare. So I'll stop there and see, we need to clean up this slide, but we'll see how, see what questions you have.
Mary Lou.
Miss Mary Lou, I think the slide is incredibly still confusing and doesn't, and I'm sorry, doesn't add a lot of value to my understanding. I think I'm finally getting it. The concept, it's taken me a while, but I've gotten it. But then when I read this thing, I kind of went, oh, holy moly, I don't know. So anyway, I'm just kind of like, sorry, Richard, but okay. I think it just confused me more. I think I'm better off without it. Thank you.
Charlie.
Actually, to me, this I would agree it doesn't help, but I think it's actually the wrong way to think about it. So to me, the biggest difference or the biggest reason for the credit is comparing a certain amount of money that is made in wages compared to that same amount of money that is made in, say, capital gains. And to me, one of the principles we want is it shouldn't matter where your income comes from, it should be taxed at the same amount. And that's what the credit is trying to do. So I really don't, I think this is kind of missing the point of what the credit is trying to do. And the comparison really should be between, and I'll try to do this at some point and see what Richard and Morgan and Will think about it. But the comparison should be between, suppose you get this amount of money in wages, or suppose you get this amount of money in dividends or capital gains or something else, business income. What's the difference? And to me, that's the critical piece of it. So I don't think it has to do with the double paying for healthcare. It has to do with the double taxation on wages compared to every other sort of income. So I will try to see if I can come up with something.
Well, Charlie, why do you think it doesn't have to do with double taxation on income? I mean, let's put to the side the moment the issue of other income that a person has different from wages, but just if you're a wage earner.
Well, because the portion that the business is paying taxes on presumably is not, it's not going to change. I mean, so that money that the business pays in the status quo would go to healthcare premiums. In our system, it would go to state taxes, and that part never gets the employee. So I really don't think that's the comparison that's appropriate, because it actually does not get to the employee in either case. It doesn't get to them as wages in the current system, because it instead is kept as the employer paying the premiums, and it doesn't get to them in our scenario because the employer is paying it in taxes. So it doesn't ever get to them. So I just don't think that that's where it is. But we'll
But it
talk
does
about this
get to them.
offline.
It does get to them because the employee gets their health care.
Okay, so the employee was getting their health care in the old system as well. So we'll talk about this offline. Let's take it offline. Yeah.
Mary Lou.
Can I add just one last thing in this discussion, that take it offline? I just don't think in the final presentation to whoever this is going to, I think it clutters up and gets everybody bogged down in this thinking about this thing. I can we just simply say that, we have looked at this, and yes, kind of what all you're saying about the employer paying. The point is that the employers are paying about the same, and that, but everybody's going to get health care, and then because we're really, doing the right thing, this will actually help you as the individual, because you'll get to deduct it off of, you'll get a tax credit at the end. I mean, I don't know whether trying to kind of explain to everybody why this theory works, as long as we feel it's a sound theory, so that the experts who come in later and question, we have an answer for why we did it. But anyway, I guess I'm just thinking more in the presentation of it, because I think it gets down in my mind way too much in the weeds.
Yeah, point well taken. John.
I just want to say, keep at it. I welcome this discussion because it's an issue I'm struggling with to understand. And of course, this transition from a more employer-based system to an individual-based system is really the probably largest policy issue here. And I did get better understanding from looking at this, but it's tricky. So hang in there. Let's keep at it. And thanks for presenting this.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to pause here a little bit and just want to open it up. You all had a chance to read the memo and want to sort of open up some of the sort of, I would say, kind of key pieces. I think we'll keep working on sort of the clarity around the credit here. I think hopefully people understand kind of the purpose here is to sort of, not distort the compensation decisions of businesses, while at the same time trying to sort of design a way that also allowed some progressivity and
Yes.
healthcare and compensation for individuals, right? So we'll work on that piece. But I think the other kind of questions I think we want to make sure is just, given what's in the memo, like what are the remaining questions that this group has that we need to continue to focus on analytically or explanatory wise to get to a level that people feel comfortable, polling on at our next meeting. Charlie.
I mean, I guess I wanted to see the rest of it, because to me, there's lots of questions I have or comments that I have related to the personal premium and the relationship between that and Medicare Part B. And so
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we should go on there, but I do have a lot of comments related to those things that we haven't yet gotten to. So
yeah, I've got a placeholder for you right here on the next slide for some of these kind of questions. But yeah.
And is this a reasonable time to go into them?
Sure.
So one of the things that John Santa had asked us to do was to look at the Medicare population in particular. And when I did so, it became clear to me that
one of the things that we should do, because the Medicare population pays a large Part B premium, is to have that premium as a credit, to be used as a credit against the state premium, so that they are not paying both the state premium and the Part B premium. So that's, to me, is sort of as a minimum thing that needs to be there, just for a little bit of fairness for the Medicare population. And then a question that's not quite as clear to me, but might need to look at a little bit, is that at low incomes, the Medicare population is paying the Part B premium, and it's not yet quite clear if the non-taxability of Social Security makes up for that, but I think it might not quite. And so for low incomes, it seems like we might need to even think about some of that Part B premium being used as a credit against the personal income tax. That part's not quite as clear to me yet, but something I want to explore. One of the difficulties in exploring that is that the AGI levels that are given are for federal AGI, which already excludes quite a bit of the Social Security income at low levels. So it's technically a little bit harder to figure some of this out. Another thing that came up in a discussion that's not related to the Medicare piece, that was suggested, I think, by some people, is that we might not want to have the personal premium be the same amount beyond 2 people. I mean, again, the comment that currently there's often times for like employer sponsored health insurance, there's a single, couple, and family cost. And so I think we want to look at lowering the personal premium after 2 people. And so that, my first exploration and suggestion is probably about half of what it is for the first 2. So the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, et cetera, is half the premium. So I think that's something we want to look at as well. And I guess that actually relates to the second comment there. So anyway, those are 2 things that I think we should explore, and I think they're going to be important to explore, and I think that it's going to help with fairness a bit. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Those are had that can to go. I was giving people a quick chance before we got into those 2 meaty topics. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, again, I think the document that we saw this time further gets us down the road. I overall liked it. I would again emphasize, I think somewhere it's important, preferably near the start, to remind people that we're talking about the state tax system. This is a state tax credit. It will have no effect. I'm not sure what effect it will have on a person's federal tax situation. As I listened to this discussion, I think that the paper focuses again on the major policy issue, which is the transition from an employer-based system to an individual-based system. But I appreciate that Charlie's now willing to look at Medicare and perhaps even some other issues related to those who are individually insured, and try to figure out a fairness vis-a-vis the way employed folks will be treated, especially as it relates to the tax credit. I think we've got 2 big health policy, we've got 2 big policy drivers here: health policy and tax policy. And I think we need to be a little cautious about putting ourselves in the position of having to determine whether existing tax policy is fair or not, and whether we should be compensating for it. My mind's still open to that, but I think we should be cautious about that. And I'm looking forward to the analysis of the Medicare situation and understanding it more. As I look at this, I also think, well, now wait a minute, Obamacare insured millions of people nationally in the individual insurance, and they did so with subsidies. And of course, we're going to try to get a waiver so that we can continue to get money for those subsidies. And so then how are those monies allocated, fairly? Are they allocated to just those same individuals, which the feds may want them to be, so that, they're not used to do something around employed folks or Medicare? I don't know, but we need to spend time now taking the accomplishments we've made in terms of the group market and the employed market and looking at the individual market and in both Medicare and the marketplace. So headed in the right direction, but more to do.
Thanks, Sean. Go ahead, Cheryl.
I certainly agree with John's policy comments and these observations that Charlie notes on the slide. I'm just responding more from a messaging or description explanation perspective in the proposal. And I think it's a great draft of a proposal. A few things that jumped out at me were, even though I know you were making the case for calling this a premium versus a tax increment or something like that, I think there's still maybe some tweaking to do to help the reader understand what we're talking about there, this premium idea. I also am not familiar with this term soft cap, and I wonder if that just means flexible. I just wasn't sure. I didn't get that from the text. And then lastly, I think even though I agree with moving up, increasing the percentage of administrative savings that we're thinking there will be, I think maybe a little bit more explanation about what is included in those administrative savings would be helpful too. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Cheryl. Mary Lou.
My question had to do with when we're getting back to this premium of up to 3,000 per adult. I didn't ever see anything in here about children in the first place. So I was just assuming it really was only on adults in the family, but maybe I'm wrong. So that didn't come clear to me. And then the other piece is just a little teeny editorial piece that back where you're talking on page 5 of the document, you're talking, I think, about the employer payroll tax all throughout, but the bold says the employee payroll tax. So I just wanted to clarify that I've all along we were talking about employer because.
Yes. Yeah, I think it might have just been a typo.
Thank you. That's all.
Yeah. Go ahead, Charlie.
So the premium could be called, I guess, a per head tax, and the way that a per head tax or a poll tax, but poll tax is probably not a good word, but the way the calculator was set up is that the premium was based upon the number of exemptions that were claimed for that filer. And so it had nothing to do with adults or children. And I don't think we can get the information about how many adults and children are in that, but in general, we could do it based upon, we probably couldn't calculate it, but we could maybe sort of estimate, I don't know, that adults and children are different. But another way to do it, which I'm proposing, is that the first two are full premium and we have a choice of how much for those exemptions beyond 2, how much that is. So I that can be put into the calculator. And I mean, I have put it into the calculator, not the, and made some attempts at what effect that has. It doesn't have a huge effect on revenue, but it does have some effect. And you could lower it to 0 beyond 2. And essentially,
there's revenue loss there, but it's not huge because there are not that many large number of exemptions claimed, but it does have an effect. So that's something that I think is useful to have in the calculator that we can play with a bit. I don't think we could do it based upon adults or not adults, but we can do it based on number of exemptions. And it's probably not that much different, but it's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Oh, the other comment was related to the soft cap. The soft cap is basically I would say a term that we made up. So one of the things that happens in some proposals for a tax plan to finance the universal health system is that there's a maximum amount that any one taxpayer would have to pay, no matter how much income they have. For example, in 2002, the proposal that went on the ballot said no one taxpayer is going to have to pay. I don't remember the number for sure, but I think it might have been 30,000. So at some point, you don't have to pay more, and that would be a hard cap. A soft cap is saying, yeah, you still have to pay more, but you don't have to pay at the same rate as you would on your smaller amount of income. So it's essentially adding a new marginal tax rate category where instead of going up in tax rate, you go down in tax rate. And that's what I've used as a meaning of soft cap, so that at some point you pay a lower rate on the income than you do for the income below that amount. Now that's something that in the calculator you can change from, the marginal rate's the same or even higher, or to the marginal rate is lower and even down to zero. And so that down to zero would be a hard cap. So that's what the soft cap is about. And the notion is that those who have a tremendous amount of income, rather than having to pay, say, $1 million in new healthcare taxes, might only have to pay, I don't know, 100,000 or something. So that's the reason why it's there. It's to explore, and we'll see what people think about it for fairness.
Thanks for that explanation. I think that's worth putting in a note section too, the explanation or definition of that.
Okay. Mary Lou.
So basically, Charlie, that would be like Social Security right now. You pay on your first 100 and whatever thousand you make, and then after that, the rich people don't pay. That's basically.
That would be a hard cap. A soft cap is the rich people still, right. The rich people still pay, but they don't pay quite as much. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's clear to me. The other piece on, I had one other thought before that. Oh, I'll just say no right now. I'm done.
Okay. Okay. So Cheryl and Mimi and others. So my sense here is unless folks have strong feelings, we're headed in the right direction.
Yes.
And I would say that big notes on sort of clarity and context as we kind of move the next draft. And I think there are big questions. To me, the remaining questions I fit into sort of like precision, where at some point in time you want to sort of get these big ideas to the board, but you still probably want to work on some of these smaller, more precise questions, like the ones that Charlie has up here, right? Those can be a little time consuming, but they're important. But I guess the question, and I'll for Mimi and Cheryl here, is like, where do we want to sort of draw the line? And I see sort of Mary Lou and Charlie have hands up, but maybe just some quick feedback, just so we can sort of understand sort of how to sort of spend our time over the next 2 weeks, and where do we need to get things, because some of these things are very important and time consuming, but also want to make sure that we don't miss sort of the forest for the trees kind of thing with the board.
Yeah, since you're asking me, I'm going to jump ahead. I was actually going to ask you something similar, just because we only have, I don't know, 30 minutes at the most left of this meeting before the public comment. And I'm not sure where we are in the slide deck and what we wanted to accomplish. I thought we were going to do kind of a fist to 5 type of vote today, and maybe we don't even have time for that. I don't know. So I was going to send those questions back to you because I'm not quite sure where we are.
Yeah. Yeah, that was what I would say here is like I feel like we wanted to sort of make sure there's clarity, and I think we wanted to kind of like move through I think the main features of this, and just kind of do a quick fist to 5 piece, but also I was keeping track of time here, and so with that, why don't we just do Mary Lou and then Charlie, because I think what we want to do is just get some of the discussion questions, and then I'd like to kind of just move us through some of the key pieces.
That sounds good. And it just for process, we've obviously blown through any break we were going to have. We're not having a break today.
Okay.
So go ahead.
My things are real quick. One is I'm struck with the idea of perfect is the enemy of the good. And so we really need to be looking at the good here. And also the part on children and the adults issue is that the insurance rates or the amount of cost for children is in the first year of life. They're very cheap after that. So anyway, if that adds anything to as we think about stuff, that's all.
Thanks, Mary Lou. Go ahead, Charlie.
So one of the a question that's come up a number of times, including in public comment, but elsewhere, is the corporate activity tax and the fairness of that. And one of the reasons for having it, I mean, I think it should be really low, which is what we have. So it's a very small increase. But one of the things that comes up in Oregon is that we have a single factor corporate income tax, which is based only upon sales. And so to some extent, the corporate activity tax makes up for that a little bit, but it doesn't do a very good job of it. So it to the extent it's trying to make up for it, it should be small. But I would like to have others, and I'm not sure who those others would be, sort of think about that. How is there a way to make up for the fact that we have a single factor corporate income tax? And does the corporate activity tax do that at all? Or should we just not have the corporate activity tax increase at all and just leave it where it is? So I think that's a question that it's sort of a detailed question that maybe we should come back to. Another question that comes up is the amount of on the employer payroll tax, the amount of individual wages that is exempted from taxes. One way to think about it is, it should be the same as for the personal income tax because we're trying to not double tax those wages. But there's arguments against that, and sort of the Walmart principle that they're trying to get away with paying their employees very little, and therefore you would reward them for doing that. So maybe there shouldn't be any personal wage or individual wage exemption and the employer payroll tax. But I also think about other employers in Oregon who are trying their best to help their employees. And if they had to pay the employer payroll tax on all of their low wage workers, it would take away from those wages, and so it actually would not help those employees. So I sort of struggle with that. I actually think it should be on the order of, I think that's what it's in there now, is 100% of federal poverty level for a single person. But maybe it should be even lower than that, but I don't think it should be 0. So that's something for people to be thinking about. So
go ahead, Cheryl.
I wanted to give you a better response to your question earlier. I do believe strongly that we need to have a straw proposal for the October board meeting. And as some of you have said and articulated, that we don't want the perfect to get in the way of the good. So we'll just do our best, and it will indicate direction. It will give the board a sense of what we're coming up with, and they can ask us questions, and we can revise and resubmit, you know, so I think that really does need to be our primary goal, that we have, we do have a straw proposal ready for the board for their October meeting. So whatever we can get to, that's what, you know, we just need to get that done at the next committee meeting.
Okay. So what I would suggest here is that we maybe take a quick fist of five and kind of we call it soft vote poll. And this is mostly just temperature checking on these pieces. I think just so we have guidance on sort of where maybe we can be more precise or where we need to be more sort of more context driven. And so I want to just, sorry, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, but I'd also say, Morgan, the straw proposal isn't finished yet. We still have to.
Yes. Yeah, we're not voting on the proposal. I'm just want to go through the items just so we have an idea where there's more or less questions or more or less uncertainties. That makes sense, Richard?
Yep.
Yeah. This isn't a vote on to move forward with the proposal as is written. We just want to do quick temperature checks. So the first one here is on the administrative savings assumption. I know Cheryl noted that we need a little more context, but from a sort of like, can't move forward with the fist versus five, where I'm pretty strongly, where are folks on sort of on that kind of core assumption that really frames what our sort of revenue target is. Five. Sorry, I should probably expand my screen so I can see everybody here. Great. All right. Jeff, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Thank you. Yep. Great. All right, so let's move on to sort of we'll call it the overall sort of framework with respect to the employer payroll tax credit. I know we have to do some more work to be precise around the context. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Charlie.
Okay, so I think we also need an explanation that, it may sort of be in there, is it's essentially we are doing something different than the assumption that the task force made regarding the administrative savings. And I think we need to explain a little bit. So that the task force basically said it probably could be up to 12%, but we want to use some of that extra money for primary care and mental and behavioral health. And we're saying, yeah, we still want to do that, but not quite so much of it, or something to that effect that explains why it is that we're doing something different than what the task force proposed, but what that ends up meaning. I think we need a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think we touched on a little bit of that, but I think we need more explanation. Go ahead, Mimi.
I was just wondering, so I had actually made a couple of slides based on the proposals that you did. So I made them ahead of time for Cheryl to present to the board. I'm wondering if you'd let me share my screen.
Yeah,
I think I have them summarized, and this might help with our kind of
all right. No, thank you.
to five discussion, if that's okay. So I'll start. If you can see this here, so this is the administrative savings portion, just what you were talking about. And so literally these are sort of cut and pasted from your proposal. And you already talked about that. And just again, just to let people know that in those things, all of that detail is in there. There's a 2-pager synopsis and then so much detail between staff work and Echo Northwest. So I don't know if this is helpful. And then I have some of the other parts of it too. So it sounds like a check mark yes on the administrative savings.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm gonna.
All right, now I'll let you take it from here.
Great. I'm just gonna roll one in between there and just make sure with respect to, I will call it kind of the key maneuver of the payroll tax and the other contributions mimicking employer contributions, but then using that as a sort of key efficiency and equity tool. Where are folks on that sort of key maneuver in the proposal?
That might be just this very top one here.
Maybe show of hands. Sorry, maybe Mimi, you can see better.
Yeah,
more
I
folks
see
than I can.
John,
Sorry.
Cheryl, Bethany, 5. Jeff, I don't know what that was.
It's made, I'm in agreement, but it goes back to the point I made earlier, whether you call the money coming from Medicare, Medicaid revenue or not, that's a key element of making this work. Without listing that, I that needs to be included.
Okay, so the
Thank
sort of call it the capture of the existing Medicaid, Medicare
Thank-
funding.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can pull on that one separately as sort of a key
Yeah.
feature as well.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you, Jeff.
Okay, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's queue up Jeff's then. But a show of hands.
Which one? What?
Sorry, this would be what Jeff just articulated. It's
Oh.
not on there, but I think since he's brought it up, like for clarity's sake, one of the key pieces here in the proposal is the implicit sort of capture or repurposing of the Medicare and Medicaid funding. Okay. Go ahead, Charlie.
I mean, it's to me that is, I think it may be critical, it may not. So for Medicaid in particular, there's things coming up that would say, maybe we really don't want to get a waiver. Maybe we want to do it in a different way. And so it kind of depends upon state's response to HR 1. And I think that is still unclear what the best way to go. But I essentially agree with Jeff, but there are so many uncertainties that it may end up being that we really don't want a Medicaid waiver. We just want to do something else.
I'll jump in on that just to add additional comment. I mean, I agree with Charlie. There's a lot of unknowns at this point. But in one way, shape, or form, the report should, if we don't have clarification by the time we get ready to submit this, we should note that we don't have clarification and there are associated dollars with not having that clarification as to what we do.
Yeah, sufficient money has to come in from the federal
Medicaid.
government somehow.
Yes.
Yes, agreed.
So I would go back to maybe just go back to the previous slide, Mimi, on the rate of the tax. And so the key part here, and I think maybe we can, provide some range here, but basically on the tax calculator, and this is not we should not have a proposal for an exact rate because of maybe some false precision, but at least a rate in this range would be necessary on average to generate those revenues that then would be used as that tax expenditure. So Vista 5 on at least the sort of direction and sort of relative magnitude. Okay, I see 5, Jeff 5. Okay, I see Bethany and John. Thank you, Cheryl.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Morgan? If we were to present this to the board, and again, just preliminary, but the range, would you say, I would 11 to 12 or?
Yeah, I mean, we'll think about good question. I mean, I would say our best guess would be in the range of 11.7%, but would hold that it could be something different. But at least based on our preliminary analysis, should give the board enough information to understand the relative magnitude that would be necessary to raise that revenue. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Do we want to say something about the firm exemption so that they understand that?
Yep.
In essence, we're limiting the collection of taxes from the majority of Oregon employers.
Yep. Yeah. I can't remember if that was one of the bullets that we had in the next slide, maybe or not, but that was one of the things on my list.
Okay.
Okay.
I had a quick question on employer tax.
Go ahead.
Okay. Did I understand earlier in discussion, because I don't know much about employer tax, that it's individually rate, somehow it's not a flat rate that every employer pays, that governments pay less or more and others pay different amounts. Is there an average amount that the state says this is how much employer payroll tax currently is? I think somebody might ask me that.
Go ahead, Charlie.
Well, so there is no, well, the current employer payroll taxes, there's a whole variety of different things. There's not any very big one, but they pay some amount for the family leave piece. They pay some amount for
I get that, Charlie, but can you
certain
say
things.
that on average right now they're paying 5% or they're paying 10% or they're paying 2%? I mean, is there something like that?
Actually, that would be a good question. That's something that maybe Echo Northwest can look into. But
Okay,
but
thank you.
there's a number of different taxes.
Yep.
And there's also there's a state one and there's also local ones. So
Okay. Anyway, it would be helpful just to have
but-
something when people ask me that I can say, we're
yeah,
doubling it.
it's small. I don't know the number, but it's on the order of probably 2% right now. So.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, so I think no, I forget now what I was going to say. I had a different comment, but
Since we're on the EPT, I can't remember if we have a bullet on this or not, Mimi, but we'll go ahead and pull for it. Had to do with the two elements of that proposal, and I think as Charlie articulated, and I think it's sort of two-sized, right? One is that it is a sort of marginal rate structure, right? So no fiscal cliffs. So that, and this is in the memo, but basically, think of it as basically wage income below a certain threshold would be then marginally phased in, and we think we have that at oh my gosh, I can't remember. Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong off the top of my head here. I don't have got my slides up, but
it was.
Let me pull it up here. Sorry.
I think
You're talking about where it's phased in.
Yeah.
I think it's 100% of
Yes.
single person FPL.
Yes.
In the current proposal.
Yeah. 100% of federal poverty level for a single person.
For one person. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it has that element. And then the second element, as Charlie articulated, there is a sort of overall payroll wage. So how much wages, businesses with wages below a certain amount would be exempt. And I think that's set at 200. Sorry, too many slides open.
Yeah, 200,000 is the number I think it was set at in that initial proposal.
It's 200,000 in your
correct.
memo.
Yeah, sorry. So FISTA 5 on sort of these two measures that are meant to sort of exempt or one, not to create the fiscal cliff, and then two, to sort of exempt a lot of small businesses. So FISTA 5. 5 from Charlie, 5 from Mary Lou, Richard. Jeff, that's 5. Okay. Bethany and John, 5. Great. Yep. The second piece here, I think we'll just, since we're talking about the business. Oh, go ahead, Cheryl.
I just wanted to explain my 4, and that is on the individual contributions. Could we have a line in there that says what this replaces? So for example, deductibles and other out-of-pocket. I mean, that so that we can compare as individuals that we're not just getting this this contribution. We're not just being required to make this contribution, that it's actually replacing contributions we're already making out of pocket. Is that something that can be explained by this? Or included in this proposal?
I'll get a slide
I'm not quite
for
sure.
that.
I'm not quite sure I'm tracking, but maybe Charlie, you have an answer?
Well, I'm not quite sure what she's asking either. So the employer payroll tax is primarily not replacing the individual's contributions, it's replacing the employer's contribution to our current system. And because it's 100% creditable on the personal income tax, it isn't coming from the employee. So again, it's replacing the employer contribution to some extent. And again, that's hard to do generally because some employers don't contribute, but that's the intent, is it's on average doing that.
And because of it has that firm exemption on payroll below 100 or 200,000, it is also acknowledging that many small businesses don't pay anything and they won't have to pay in the new system. So it's sort of a rough replacement of the employer's contribution for employer-sponsored health insurance.
I was looking at the individual.
Oh yeah, sorry.
contributions, so I'm not really understanding how
We'll
that
get to we'll get to that one. Sorry, I thought we were just talking about
Oh, okay. I was looking at the slide.
sorry.
I know, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I moved too
I'm
fast.
confused.
Sorry.
I'm confused.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Cheryl's point though brings up, I think something we'll eventually have to do. We're nowhere near able to do it because the value is not only in the cost sharing elements that people will no longer pay, and potentially in the case of some Medicare folks in the premiums that they're paying for Part B. But Charlie's made the point previously, it's also in the value of coming to a single reimbursement rate. And that should be valuable to Medicare and Medicaid folks. So I think in terms of working with our communication colleagues, we are going to need to have a step where we help them to understand all of the values that are coming forward for folks. And I don't think we have the time to do that before the board meeting. And we will definitely need Milliman, because the other value will be benefit design changes. Again, the Medicare population will have access to a dental benefit, presumably, which is a very substantial value anyway.
Yes, good point. And I just wanted to interject here. So if we just voted on the employer payroll tax, that would be 5 for me. I thought we were voting on the individual premium because that was a slide that was up and that we had already voted on the employer payroll tax.
Sorry. Yeah, I know we got a little disjointed on what's there and
Okay.
what
All right.
elements
All
that we
right.
need to move forward. No
Yeah,
worries.
I get
Go
it.
ahead, Richard.
To Cheryl's point, one of the crucial figures that still needs to be added to the proposal, Cheryl, is to show individuals before and after, and all that they pay in terms of personally paid premiums, deductibles, cost sharing. All that will be shown prior, and then we'll show how they pay now through healthcare personal income tax and a personal premium and how they're better off that way. So
yeah, that'll be great. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to the next slide, Mimi. So before we get to the individual contributions, let's do the bottom slide, the supplemental business and consumption taxes. And we'll split this into 2. The first one here, I think, as Charlie articulated, there are small increases in the 2 primary way businesses are taxed. And that has to do with the way they sort of organize, but we have the corporate income tax and the corporate activity tax. They have slightly different bases. And I think, as Charlie articulated, there's some trade-offs on how high you want to set some of those rates, but generally the principle here is keeping the incidence of those taxes fairly low. We can still work on some of the exact rate pieces, but we'd like a little fist of 5 on at least the intent to include those contributions as well as part of the employer payroll taxes, so the way that businesses also contribute to funding the plan. Charlie, anything else you want to say to that before we vote, or is that good?
No, other than I guess that my biggest question relates to the corporate activity tax, and should it be there at all, or should it just be something low? So yeah.
But with that caveat in there, we can include that as part of our discussion in that section. But fist of 5 on the direction and the context there. Okay, I see 5s from everyone. Great. And Bethany, yep, great. Right. I want to split the second part out of that. We also, not in the memo, but in previous discussions, we have contributions both from a health policy and sort of beneficiary sort of nexus to include lodging, cigarette, beer and wine, marijuana taxes, sin taxes. I think to me, I think we have some discussion on those pieces. The rates that we have included in those are fairly small, but we don't know. I think the idea here is to provide some nexus, either on sort of the the health costs of some of that consumption, or sort of for administering the benefit and care claims for people who are visitors. So I would say it's still TBD. We have some small marginal rate increases in there. I would say we probably want not to be too precise about what we think the exact one is, because that is still TBD based on sort of some analysis. But given that those conditions and caveats, where are we fist to five on those other sort of selective consumption and visitor taxes? Right. I see 5. Jeff, John, great. 5 around. Okay, let's move up to the top one then, is the introduction of this sort of, we'll call it two-part structure of a healthcare personal income tax, as well as a sort of income-sensitive per person premium, as sort of the way that individuals contribute to the plan. Currently, we have the idea here to have a phase-in on the income tax, so individuals below a certain threshold as measured in the federal poverty level, as well as on the income side, on the sort of per person premium side, at about 300% of federal poverty level, that is sort of capped at $3,000 per adult. I see, Charlie, I was going to call on you to sort of maybe provide any more explanation or discussion on this piece.
Right now, it is the way the calculator is set up. It is not per adult; it's per exemption.
Per exemption, excuse me. Yeah, that's
and I think that is something we do want to change. But in fact, at this point, it's per exemption.
Yeah, thank you. That's precise. But I think there's this question of per adult versus per person. That still, it needs to be sort of discussed. But like the general sense here is that there is some either more or less sort of cost sharing depending on sort of household size and structure. So let's do a quick fist to 5 on these parameters. Okay, I see Charlie with a 4, 5 from Jeff, 5 from John, 4 from Cheryl. Charlie, anything else you want to sort of discuss with that? Okay. Just
Mary Lou had
there's
a
still
5.
a significant amount of uncertainty. Great. All right. All right. I don't know if you have what's on the next slide there, Mimi.
No, the only thing, this is just more of kind of the theory behind what you guys are doing. And the very first slide I had really, I think, summed it up.
Yeah, well, these
so
were
we don't need to vote on those.
Sorry, I didn't know if
You're
I
done.
had my list
No
of
more
things
voting.
to pull on complete, so I didn't know if you had anything else in there. But I'll pause here, and I would say, are there other key questions or elements to the proposal, Charlie, Richard, that you think we need to kind of take the temperature on here? But otherwise, what I'm seeing here is pretty strong consensus on the direction and sort of current parameterization of these sort of key elements.
That's just kind of the summary.
Yeah. Great. Well, other than that, I would say big thank you to Charlie and Richard for all their help, and thank you for everybody for the feedback. All of it's wonderful and helping us kind of move this forward. Go ahead, Charlie.
So I'm not sure we need it for the straw proposal, but we might. And one of the things we might need to explain is, why are we keeping employers in this game? I mean, because one of the things that we want to do is, a lot of advocates would like is to see employers not in the game of providing healthcare for their employees, or providing the funding for it. And so I think we might need to talk a little bit about why that we want to still keep them in the game, sort of in this manner. And I mean, there's a number of reasons for that, and we probably don't have to go into them now, but it probably needs a little bit of an explanation.
Yeah. Charlie, do you want to answer maybe your question with a few of those bullet points?
So one is, if we don't keep them in the game, all of a sudden they're not going to have to pay anything, and it's all going to be on individuals. And
are we just going to assume that those individuals will get a whole bunch more wages because of that? And a lot of people say, well, nah, they're going to get maybe a little bit of it, but probably not enough of it. And so we need to keep them in the game for that reason. I would say the other big reason, maybe bigger reason, is we need to keep them in the game because of federal tax law, that there's a huge federal tax expenditure for employer-sponsored health insurance, both on the employer side and the employee side for those contributions. You don't have to pay either income tax or FICA on that portion, and we want to retain some of that money in Oregon. And I think that retain some of that money in Oregon might have been said in something that I'm not sure if it was in the straw proposal or not, but I think those are basically the two reasons.
Go ahead, John.
Well, my sense is I think we've made a pretty strong statement that the employer contribution actually is a indirect employee contribution. And from a policy point of view, it seems to me we've said that the influence of employers is and will be significantly reduced. That said, and here's another coordination issue, the task force, I think, clearly came to a point where the best way to deal with ERISA was to structure things so that those large employers would opt in, and they would make the choice to opt in. So the reality, because of ERISA, is either give them the choice to opt in or be prepared for multiple legal battles. So there is an opt-in process. My own prediction is it'll have to be even a little bit more favorable to employees to opt in. And on my scenario, I specifically looked at doing so, and I think it could be done without a lot of impact. So I think Charlie's points are good ones and sophisticated ones. But the feasibility reality relates to the ERISA and the reality that those folks have to opt in, or else we've got a legal fight on our hands.
Go ahead, Cheryl, and then Mary Lou.
We have a couple public comments. We're really going to have to cut it off. I think here, unless Mary Lou has a very brief comment. And I just want to check in with you, Morgan. Do you feel like we have our marching orders for the next committee?
We do.
Okay.
We're going to have to find an endpoint here quickly.
Yes.
And I think we have that. But I think we'll all acknowledge that there's still some remaining questions, and we'll want to condition that appropriately in the proposal that will go out. So.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Morgan. And I want to hand it over to Isabel for public comment. We have 2 and potentially 3 public comments today. So go ahead, Isabel.
Thank you. Yes. So as always, we really appreciate everyone, members of the public that are engaged in this work and prepare and share public comment. Written public comment can be submitted at any time via our website. And we ask that that be submitted no less than 72 hours before the meeting so that we can include it in the meeting materials. And for oral public comment, people can sign up 24 hours in advance. Today, I have Becky signed up for public comment. We have one individual signed up that did not appear in the meeting today. And then Linda, we received your written comment, but I wanted to confirm if you had oral comment to share today. But we can first go to Becky to share your comment. Becky, you should be able to unmute now and share. I see Becky, but I don't know if Becky's able to unmute right now. So Linda, if you had comment to share,
No, I was not planning on making a verbal comment today.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Then I'll go back to Becky. Becky, are you here and able to unmute to share your comment today? Doesn't look like it. I'll follow up with you to see if we can troubleshoot and maybe get you at the next meeting.
Yeah, and we invite you to submit written comment too, if you'd like. Okay.
It looks
with
like
that-
Becky, are you able to unmute now?
Well, I can. I just want to say that
Okay.
retirees cannot afford a 12% tax just because they make a living wage in Portland. Retirees cannot afford a 12% tax because they make enough money. We planned our budgets based on current, and that would add probably about $10,000 additional tax with no benefits. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comment, Becky. And with that, I think there are no further public comments. Is that right, Isabel?
That's correct.
Okay. So we'll adjourn and we'll be meeting in 2 weeks to finalize our straw proposal. So thank you very much, committee members, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
John still has his hand up.
I think maybe it's a phantom hand.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, it is.
So,
Sorry.
Okay,
sorry.
thank you.
committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you
Okay.
all.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.